But after listening to Doss that weekend, I went to a guy that later went over to Japan as a missionary, and I said, "Where can I get one of those bee rations?" And he says, "Well, I have one right here." And I said, "Well, could I have it?" And he says, "That'll be 5 cents." And so I dug out my nickel and gave it to him. And I had those 4 verses memorized before I got back to Baylor. And I enrolled in the TMS, was 108 verses in that day. And did it all through the next, for about 9 months.
Who was the guy who really started helping you grow?
Well, I had walked with God through my sophomore, junior, and senior year in Hollis, Oklahoma. I was spending time with God every day, early in the morning, and I can't remember how I was, because I became a Christian in 46, but my junior high years, I wasn't walking with God and had a lot later to confess. But January 1st, 1950, I started getting up each morning and giving God 30 minutes before breakfast. And I started walking with God, and in the last 2 years of high school, I had the privilege of seeing 9 of my classmates, men, come to Christ. And my mother said, she's the one that assimilated. She said, "Jim, why don't you have these friends of yours, one at a time, come to our house for dinner?" And I said, "Well, okay, I will." So I invited them, but they would come over. I went and picked them up, or their mother dropped them up or something. And so we had dinner, and then on me taking them back home in my parents' car, I said, "Would you like to know what Jesus has done in my life?" And they said, "Sure." So we pull over into the parking lot over there, and I give my testimony to them. And 9 of those came to Christ. And but when I went to Baylor, I was kind of disillusioned with follow-up, or with Doss opened my eyes to what I hadn't given those people. Just leading them to Christ wasn't where they needed to go. They needed to know how to grow. And that's what Doss really lit with me. And so I went back, but what I got out of 4 years at Baylor had very little, if any, with the classes and the professors. But it was the upperclassmen that were NAV contacts on the campus. And that campus, that time we went up to that conference with Doss, we had 2 buses with about 90 students from Baylor that went to that NAV conference.
Wow.
It was huge. We had lots of them there. And some of them were those men in sophomore, junior, senior year. One of them was Lyman Coleman, who last I talked with him, he's still going on with the Lord. And another one was John Ingoff, and he was a missionary with the Southern Baptists in Indonesia for about 35 years. And then Waylon Moore, Waylon just passed away this last week, and I got an email from his daughter telling me about the funeral. Baylor, Waylon about 1951, Bill Bright had started, he had this vision of reaching people on the campus, but he didn't have the wherewithal to bring about follow-up. So he got in touch with Dawson Trotman, and Dawson loaned him Skip Gray, Leroy Imes, Jack Patterson, and Waylon Moore, and one other guy to go out for a year at UCLA or USC.
Yeah, UCLA.
What?
I think it's UCLA.
UCLA, and set up follow-up on the campuses. So when I went to my second NAV conference in July of 1953, it was there in Southern California, out east of LA, and Waylon Moore was there. It's where I met him, and he, if the conference was over, he gave me a ride all the way back to Baylor, and Dawson asked him to be in charge of the ministry there for a year, and then Skip Gray came on the scene. So that's my history.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And I graduated in '56 and moved into the NAV home with Skip and Buzzy Gray, and I was enrolled in the Dallas Seminary. And
Skip was in Fort Worth or Dallas.
Dallas, yeah, over in kind of East Dallas.
Yeah.
And one day, I think it was in December, that I was driving down to South Texas to speak at some church youth meeting or something. And I was down south of Dallas heading down toward Houston, and it was just a 2-lane road, and a guy coming, there were 3 cars coming toward me, and I was reviewing verses and driving along there, and that front car went out of control because the 2 back cars were racing, and the middle one was looking through his rearview mirror to make sure the back one didn't pass him, and he didn't see that the front car was getting close to me coming, and he slowed down so the guy could get around, but he looked up in time just to hit the brake and swerve over and hit him over that side of the car, and he said that guy right over head on with me.
Wow.
And I had my coat hanging right here on the rack, and when that car hit, that whatever it was on the front of that car went through the windshield and caught my coat and pinned it to the back glass.
Wow.
And I spun around 180 degrees in the car, and my car door flew open. They didn't have seat belts in those days, and it threw me out into some soft dirt, and that door coming open kept that car from rolling over me. And I had a nosebleed. It really wasn't that much hurt, but the head, and I looked up, and man, there were cars stopping everywhere, and I looked over, and one guy's legs were still in the car, and his head was out on the pavement. He was thrown out on that concrete. I found out later he died, and his wife and 3 kids. I later drove down and saw them. They were, but anyway, I walked over to a little cornfield right there and got down on my knees, and I said, God, I don't understand how I live through this. But whatever's left of my life, I give it to you. And by not having a car, I wasn't able to pay my room and board to Skip and Bussy. and I kept waiting for him to get it, and I was getting about a month or 6 weeks behind in my room and board. And Skip said, you know, I think you need to drop out of seminary and go get a job. So I did. I got a job packaging boots and shoes on the back alley of Dallas. And then later I got another job and finished it in December. But I dropped out of the seminary. And I asked Skip if I could have the weekend off. And I went to a little motel right down in the kind of just little small section of East Dallas. I got in that motel and I said, God, what do you want me to do? And when I had seen Dawson Trotman the previous summer, he suggested that I go in the military for 2 years just to get some training and being in the military, and then decide what to do. And so I thought, well, I could go in the military, or I could try to get back into Dallas Seminary, or Skip mentioned me going up to Glen Eyrie for some training. So I got to that motel and spent the weekend with God, and I had a plus and minus for each one of those. I wrote it all out like that, and it was pretty even. And I remember being on my knees, and I said, God, tell me what to do, and I'll do it with all my heart. And I felt him saying to me, whispering to me, you pick one and believe that I'm in it. And I looked down at my do list, my weakness and my strength of those decisions. And so, you know, I think I'll go up to Colorado Springs. And so I told the Lord that. I said, Lord, I pick one. But I want to tell you that if I got the wrong one, you just let me know and I'll turn around and come back. But I was driving up through New Mexico and got up to Glen Eyrie on New Year's Eve, 1957, and entered their training program. And 6 months later, the woman who would become my wife showed up. And if I'd gone in the military, or if I'd tried to get back in seminary, I would have never met Jerry. And of human beings, my mother and dad were great influences on my life, and the Navigators were great. But the person who had the greatest influence in my life in a very quiet, soft way was my wife. But we prayed together every day. We ministered in our NAV home together every week, and so in fact, I remember the time our daughter had a problem in her marriage, and something happened, and I had to rush down, and Max and Sandra put me up in their home for a few days. And but it's been a great journey. And so what's going on with you guys?